Dr. Langton's introduction that not too long ago we read some reports that the physicians may overutilize the CAT scan, the CT scans, exposing patients to a lot of extra radiation. We also know that mammograms are very routinely being used, which is ionizing radiation by itself. We also know that women, men for that matter, who have BRCA1, BRCA1 and or BRCA2, BRCA2 breast cancer genes are extremely sensitive to radiation. We also know that the physician, before he will prescribe a mammogram, will not inquire about the presence of BRCA1 and BRCA2. What is your opinion of submitting a person without these tests, genetic determinants, to, for instance, mammograms?
I'm sorry, I just didn't get the question.
He's talking about BRCA1 and BRCA2 people are sensitive to radiation, to ionizing radiation. Would you recommend a mammogram to someone with those without testing for them first?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sorry.
Okay. Chris Barr.
Dr. John Groffman, who collectively has more radiation experience than any man alive, says 75% of all breast cancer is due to mammograms. Going back to 1940 at the Atomic Energy Commission after they were formed, etc. Dr. John Groffman, look it up.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll second that. And
All
I
right.
had a mammography center at one time.
Thank you very much. Next on the program is also something that's extremely vitally important, and that is what are we going to do about some of the legislative onslaught against what we're trying to do. And I know of no one better in that field than Clinton Miller.
Thank you, Frank. All of you have in front of you, or should have, a copy of a form letter. You know the drill. If you don't have this, it says at the top of it, don't let the Codex destroy the shay. If you don't have it, raise your hand, and we'll have the usher pass you a couple. Now you should have two of them. You sign the first one, and that will be delivered, hand-delivered to both Senator Hatch and to Senator Harkin in Washington, D.C. by our legislative advocate there. The second one you take home and you copy it and do exactly like I'm doing here. You make it available to your patients, to your friends, you have them sign it, and the fax number is right at the top. Keep them signed, keep them flowing. Now, this is important because by this you are making sure that the law, and we don't live under kings here, we don't live under emperors, we do not live under dictators, we live under the law. And if you take care of this every day, the law will take care of you. We've got another person over here. Now, I had this wonderful experience last night. The last speaker of the day was Melissa Weaver. And she met me this morning and her eyes were a little bewildered. And she said, you know, I don't know where to be insulted or complimented. She says, I was the last speaker of the day. And of course, as you remember, we just swarmed around her booth until all hours. Now you know now, and Melissa, if you're watching this DVD, you know that when you're the last one on the program, it's a compliment. They put the best to the last. Remember that. Now, I want you to know the history of why we're here. We're here because about 60 years ago, a revolution started in America. We call it the Health Revolution. And it started in the health food stores, which then were nothing more than bran and a little honey and maybe brewer's yeast. And there was a woman named Adele Davis that had written a book, several books, that were bestsellers. And all we young people who had large families would begin to read these books, and suddenly fear left our lives. Because we would read in there that there were such things as dietary supplements that you could take that would treat and prevent disease. We were no longer fearful every time our children would get a cold. And when we would see our doctors, who were our good friends, they would say, well, why didn't you show up for your appointment? And our answer was, well, we don't need you anymore. We've read the book. Now that sent, talk about terrorism, that sent terror into the hearts of people who had given their lives to train people to think that the only way in the world you could be healthy was with drugs. And so they set out a procedure to destroy this infant industry in the 50s, because they knew that if it got really rolling, there would be no medical industry. If you got something that costs far less than a drug, and it's far more effective, and it's far safer, you don't want to compete with that. Now, in 1962, I had the opportunity of going back to Washington, D.C. as the legislative advocate for the National Health Federation. There are no schools for lobbyists. You learn that on the street. And when I went in at 62, a health food store owner called me up and said, "Have you seen the Federal Register today?" And I said, "No, I've not." Now, the Federal Register, for those of you who do not know, is printed every day in Washington, D.C., and it's about the size of a telephone book. And in it are the new rules and regulations that the agencies have proposed to become our laws, and most of them are excellent. Agencies tell you how, to take planes and so forth like that. But this day, there was a proposal to destroy the health foods industry as clear and precise as you could imagine. It simply said that no vitamin or mineral can be sold if it's over 50% of the RDA. The RDA at that time for vitamin C was 60 milligrams. 50% of that would be another 30. How many of you take over 90 milligrams of vitamin C a day? Okay, most of the people that were in the health foods industry were doing it, and what was frightening to the orthodox establishment mind, and I don't fault it, is that they had been taught that anything that treats or prevents a disease is a drug. We went to work when that proposal was made, because in 60 days it becomes a regulation. There's nothing you can do to stop it. We put more mail into Congress following that proposal than they had received on anything else except the Vietnam War and Watergate. We did it with an organization of less than 3,000 people, about 1/100th of what we now have in the industry. That mail was made primarily by the form letter that I prepared. You couldn't walk into a health food store or a chiropractic's office during those days, but would you see my form letters there, and they would sign them, and it was said, "Pass the Proxmire bill." And the Proxmire bill simply said you could take vitamins or minerals in any potency or combination that you want, as long as it's not intrinsically injurious to health, at the recommended dosage. Fast forward